Before kings ruled the roads, merchants ruled the distance, across burning deserts, frozen mountain passes, and cities filled with spies. Silk Road traders carried silk, gold, spices, horses, and secrets worth more than entire kingdoms. Some built fortunes so vast that even rulers depended on their money, their information, and their caravans. But every journey risked robbery, betrayal, war, or death. So how did ordinary merchants become richer than kings? Before we follow their trail across the ancient world, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more forgotten stories from history. Before dawn, the desert is almost blue. Frost clings to the camel saddles, and the stars hang low as the caravan moves beneath a roof of cold fire. No city is visible. No river cuts the darkness. There is only sand under padded feet, the creak of wooden packs, and the careful breathing of men who know that a single mistake can cost more than money. Somewhere behind them lie the markets of Western China. Somewhere ahead, beyond mountain walls and salt flats, wait the cities of Central Asia, Persia, India, and the Mediterranean. Between them stretches not one road, but a shifting web of trails, guarded passes, dry wells, ruined forts, and remembered directions. On those paths, a merchant can become wealthier than a prince, or vanish without leaving enough behind to identify his bones. The cargo looks ordinary in the first light. Bundles are wrapped in felt, jars sealed with pitch, and chests marked with family signs. Yet inside sit objects whose value rises with every border crossed silk, fine enough to pass through a ring, musk, polished stones, medicines, spices, silver, glass, dyes, paper, and metalwork. These goods rarely travel from one end of Eurasia to the other in a single journey. They move hand to hand, market to market, language to language. Each exchange adds danger, tax, rumour, and profit. The Silk Road is therefore less a road than a chain of human decisions, and those who master it become bankers, interpreters, negotiators, messengers, and keepers of information. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. If this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy, the story ahead is not only about silk, and it is not only about kings. It is about the men and women who learn to profit from the spaces between empires. As the sun rises, the caravan lengthens, each animal loaded according to strength and temperament. Bactrian camels, with 2 humps and thick coats, are especially valuable across the colder deserts and uplands of Inner Asia. They carry heavy loads and survive severe temperature changes. But even they depend on planning. A caravan leader must know where water can be found, which wells have turned bitter, which passes are blocked by snow, and which ruler has raised tolls. Maps cannot replace lived memory. Knowledge travels through guides, innkeepers, monks, soldiers, shepherds, and other merchants. A rumour about a closed gate may be false, but ignoring it may be fatal. The landscape itself acts like an invisible tax collector. In the Taklamakan, routes bend around a desert whose name is often associated with the idea that those who enter do not return, though scholars still debate its exact origin and meaning. Along its edges, oasis towns survive where mountain water reaches the basin, miss one watering place, or arrive after a well has failed, and bales of silk become useless weight. Farther west, the Pamirs and related highlands force caravans through thin air, steep valleys, sudden storms, and narrow paths where pack animals can tumble into ravines. Other routes turn south toward India or west across dry plateaus and steppe corridors, passing cities whose safety depends on whichever empire currently claims them. Most travellers do not imagine Eurasia as a single connected world. They know only sections of it. A Sogdian merchant from Samarkand may understand the roads to Chinese frontier towns and the customs of Turkic rulers. A Persian trader may know the markets of Iran and Mesopotamia. An Indian merchant may bring spices, gemstones, or textiles northward. A Syrian or Jewish commercial family may have contacts farther west. Goods travel farther than most individuals, and stories travel farther still. By the time a luxury object reaches a royal court, its maker may be unknown, its origin distorted, and its price multiplied many times. This uncertainty is part of the business. A merchant must judge quality without always knowing the producer. He must accept coins of unfamiliar weight, compare silver purity, estimate future demand, and decide whom to trust in a city where his language is barely understood. Wealth comes not simply from buying cheaply and selling dearly, but from knowing why something is cheap in one place and desired in another. A roll of silk may be clothing in one market, diplomatic currency in another, temple decoration in a third, and portable treasure everywhere. Pepper becomes more valuable the farther it moves from the climates where it grows. Fine glass from the Roman world can astonish customers thousands of miles away. Strong horses from Central Asia become matters of imperial security in China, where rulers value them for cavalry and prestige. The surviving record makes it clear that some merchants accumulated remarkable fortunes, but exact comparisons with kings remain difficult. Wealth in the ancient and medieval worlds cannot be measured neatly across different societies, and royal resources include land, taxes, labour, and armies rather than only movable property. Even so, what survives in the record suggests that certain commercial families controlled capital, credit, and networks on a scale that could rival the disposable wealth of lesser rulers. Their riches did not rest in a single palace vault. They were scattered across caravans, warehouses, debts, partnerships, property, and relatives stationed in distant cities. Their strength lay in dispersal. One lost caravan could wound a family, but it did not always destroy the wider network. By mid-morning, the caravan is exposed beneath the sun. The cold has vanished, replaced by glare. Cloth is wrapped across faces. The animals move without haste because speed wastes strength. Somewhere ahead stands a caravanserai with walls thick enough to discourage thieves, a courtyard for animals, and rooms where news moves faster than merchandise. There, men compare prices, inspect goods, exchange warnings, settle old accounts, and begin new agreements. A merchant may learn that a distant court now favours a certain colour, that a rebellion has closed a road, or that a governor can be persuaded with gifts. Such information can transform a modest cargo into a fortune. The caravan continues. Small against the scale of the land, it carries no banners of conquest, yet it binds kingdoms together more quietly than an army. Every bale and sealed jar contains a calculation about distance, desire, and survival. Every traveller understands that the road gives nothing without demanding something in return. The first great mystery of Silk Road wealth begins here, not in a treasure chamber, but in the ability to cross a world that seems designed to keep its peoples apart. Long before silk gives the network its famous name, the land is already crossed by older paths. Hunters follow herds through mountain corridors. Pastoral communities move between seasonal grazing grounds. Farmers carry grain and pottery to neighbouring valleys. Metalworkers seek copper, tin, gold, and workable stone. Armies march where traders later travel, and traders follow where armies have already forced open the way. The routes that eventually bind Eastern Asia to the Mediterranean do not appear fully formed. They accumulate slowly, one pass, river crossing, market, and political frontier at a time. Across the ancient world, geography encourages movement while also controlling it. The broad grasslands of the Eurasian steppe allow riders and herders to travel immense distances, but forests, deserts, and mountains funnel them into usable corridors. The Iranian plateau links Mesopotamia with Central Asia and the lands farther east. River valleys create natural lines of settlement and exchange. Mountain passes through the Hindu Kush, and the ranges of Inner Asia connect regions that otherwise seem sealed apart. No single people controls all of these spaces, and no central authority designs a transcontinental trade system. The connection emerges because countless local networks overlap. Some of the earliest long-distance exchanges can be traced through materials found far from their natural sources. Lapis lazuli from the mountains of Badakhshan reaches Mesopotamia and Egypt thousands of years before the rise of the classical Silk Road. Its deep blue colour makes it valuable for jewellery, ritual objects, and royal decoration. Tin, essential for producing bronze, travels through complicated networks whose precise routes scholars still debate. Shells from distant seas appear in inland graves. Jade moves across regions of China. Amber from northern Europe travels southward. These objects reveal that ancient communities understand distance not as an absolute barrier, but as a series of manageable stages. The merchants responsible for such movement often remain invisible. Their names are rarely recorded, and their journeys are reconstructed from objects rather than biographies. A bead found in a grave may have passed through 10 hands. A lump of metal may have crossed several cultural boundaries before reaching the workshop where it is transformed. Archaeology shows the destination, and sometimes the origin, but the middle is often missing. The evidence remains incomplete. Yet the pattern is unmistakable long before organised empires link Eurasia politically. Exchange is already linking it materially. Empires expand these pathways by making movement both easier and more dangerous. A strong state can build roads, station troops, maintain bridges, issue standard weights, and punish banditry. It can also impose tolls, seize goods, close frontiers, and redirect trade toward favoured cities. In the ancient Near East, imperial roads help officials and armies move rapidly, but merchants benefit from them as well. The Persian Royal Road, associated with the Achaemenid Empire, stretches across a vast domain from the Aegean region toward the imperial heartlands. It is designed primarily for communication and control, yet the stations, security, and infrastructure surrounding it support commercial movement. Farther east, Chinese states create their own roads and guarded corridors as they compete for territory and resources. Before imperial unification, rival kingdoms already maintain regional networks linking capitals, agricultural zones, frontier settlements, and areas rich in horses or metals. The Qin and Han dynasties later strengthened many of these routes, but their foundations are older. Roads serve taxation and warfare first. Commerce follows closely behind because soldiers, administrators, and settlers all require food, clothing, animals, tools, and luxury goods. To the south, the routes of northern India connect cities across the Gangetic Plains and lead toward the Indus region, the Iranian world, and ports on the Arabian Sea. These roads carry textiles, spices, ivory, precious stones, religious ideas, and administrative practices. Mountain passages link the subcontinent with Bactria and Central Asia. The routes are difficult, but they become among the most important junctions in the wider system, because they unite overland and maritime commerce. The sea is never separate from the story. Coastal shipping in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, Red Sea, and Indian Ocean carries goods that later enter inland caravans. Sailors learn to use seasonal winds, allowing ships to cross long distances with greater predictability. Cargo arriving at a port may travel hundreds or thousands of miles by river and road. A spice grown in southern India can pass through an ocean harbour, a desert caravan, and several urban markets before reaching a wealthy household in the Mediterranean. The Silk Road will eventually be imagined as an east-west ribbon across the land, but in reality, it is always joined to maritime routes extending southward. Central Asia becomes the hinge. Here, settled farming communities and mobile pastoral societies meet. Their relationship is not simply one of conflict. Nomads provide horses, livestock, animal products, protection, transport, and knowledge of the steppe. Towns provide grain, textiles, metal goods, and stable markets. Raiding occurs, sometimes on a devastating scale, but exchange is just as persistent. A frontier may be a line of danger and a zone of opportunity at the same time. One lesser-known feature of these early networks is how often political gifts and commercial trade overlap. Rulers send horses, precious objects, fabrics, and rare animals to other courts as signs of alliance or submission. Official records may describe such transfers as tribute, but merchants, envoys, and interpreters often stand behind them. What appears ceremonial can open a profitable channel. Once a court develops a taste for an imported material, demand spreads among elites who imitate royal fashion. A diplomatic exchange can create a market. The conquests of Alexander of Macedon alter many of these older systems without creating them from nothing. Greek and Macedonian armies moved deep into Egypt, Persia, Central Asia, and northwestern India, establishing cities and military settlements across regions already connected by trade. After Alexander's empire fragments, successor states preserve parts of this expanded political world. Greek-speaking communities exist beside Iranian, Indian, and Central Asian populations. Coins, artistic forms, religious images, and administrative customs circulate through the resulting borderlands. Bactria, positioned between the Iranian plateau, the steppe, India, and the routes toward China, becomes especially important. Its fertile valleys support wealthy cities, while surrounding mountains guard access to precious materials and strategic passes. Greek rulers in the region issue elaborate coinage and participate in trade extending far beyond their political borders, yet their prosperity depends on local systems older than their arrival. They inherit roads, marketplaces, and relationships they do not fully control. Meanwhile, powerful nomadic confederations move across the northern frontiers of China and Central Asia. Their demand for grain, silk, metal goods, and luxury objects creates exchange even when relations with settled states are hostile. Chinese rulers use gifts of silk as diplomatic tools, sometimes sending enormous quantities to secure peace or reward allies. This silk may then move westward through secondary trade. It does not yet travel under a single commercial plan. It leaks through diplomacy, warfare, marriage, tribute, and barter. By the time the great transcontinental commerce of later centuries begins to intensify, nearly every essential element is already present: mountain guides, caravan animals, fortified roads, imperial post stations, oasis markets, maritime connections, nomadic intermediaries, and a long human habit of turning rarity into value. The Silk Road does not begin with silk. It begins with the older realization that beyond every difficult horizon lies something unavailable at home, and that those willing to bridge the distance can command a price almost no ruler can ignore. Silk enters these older networks quietly, long before anyone in the Western world understands how it is made. It begins not in a palace treasury but in cultivated groves of mulberry trees, where silkworms feed on leaves beneath careful human supervision. Their life cycle is brief, fragile, and astonishingly productive. When the larvae spin cocoons, each one creates a filament that can extend for hundreds of meters. The thread is almost impossibly fine, yet when several strands are combined, reeled, twisted, dyed, and woven, it becomes a fabric unlike anything most ancient societies can produce. It is light but strong, warm in cold air, cool against the skin, and capable of holding colours with a brilliance that makes ordinary wool and linen seem heavy by comparison. The origins of Chinese sericulture reach deep into prehistory. Archaeological discoveries suggest that silk is used in parts of China thousands of years before the Han Dynasty, though scholars still debate the exact timing and scale of its earliest production. Fragments survive in tombs. Impressions appear on objects where the original cloth has vanished, and traces of silk proteins have been identified in ancient burials. Later tradition credits a legendary empress with discovering silk after a cocoon falls into hot water, but this elegant story belongs more to cultural memory than verifiable history. What the evidence does show is that sericulture develops gradually through generations of observation, breeding, and highly specialized labor. Producing silk requires far more than collecting wild cocoons. Domesticated silkworms become dependent on human care. They must be protected from sudden temperature changes, disease, predators, smoke, and loud disturbance. Mulberry leaves must be gathered at the proper stage and supplied continuously. The cocoons are heated before the moths emerge, because an escaping moth cuts through the filament and breaks the long thread into shorter pieces. The intact cocoons are then softened in hot water so the fine strands can be found and reeled together. Every stage demands time, judgment, and discipline. A small failure can ruin weeks of work. Much of this labour is performed within households, particularly by women. Elite Chinese texts often present sericulture as a model of ordered domestic production, linking the work of women to the moral and economic health of the state. Empresses participate in ceremonial acts connected with mulberry cultivation and silk making, just as emperors perform rituals associated with agriculture. Behind the ceremony stands an enormous practical system. Women raise silkworms, reel thread, operate looms, manage patterns, and pass techniques from one generation to the next. Their names rarely survive, but the international prestige of silk rests on their skill. As Chinese states become larger and more centralized, silk acquires uses far beyond clothing. It serves as payment for officials and soldiers, as a form of taxation, as a diplomatic gift, and at times almost as a currency. Bolts of standardized cloth can be stored, transported, divided, exchanged, and measured. Unlike grain, silk is compact and resists spoilage when kept dry. It concentrates great value into a manageable load, making it ideal for long-distance movement. A caravan animal carrying silk may bear wealth far greater than one carrying ordinary food or pottery. The association between silk and imperial authority strengthens its desirability. Court clothing communicates rank through colour, pattern, and quality. Fine textiles cover walls, wrap sacred objects, line coffins, and accompany the dead into elaborate tombs. Silk banners appear in ritual and military settings. Written documents can even be placed on silk when bamboo strips are too bulky, and paper is not yet common. A single material enters nearly every sphere of elite life politics, religion, warfare, burial, administration, and personal display. Later accounts often describe silk production as a closely guarded Chinese secret, but the reality is more complicated. There is no surviving evidence of one permanent, perfectly enforced ban that prevents all knowledge from leaving China throughout antiquity. Sericulture is concentrated in Chinese regions because it requires domesticated insects, mulberry cultivation, technical expertise, and an established labour system. That combination is difficult to reproduce abroad. Even without spies or border guards, states have obvious reasons to protect profitable knowledge, yet geography, biology, and specialised practice may have guarded silk as effectively as law. For consumers far to the west, the material's origin becomes mysterious. Some classical writers imagine silk growing on trees or being combed from leaves. Others understand that insects are involved but possess only fragmentary information. The misunderstandings are not surprising. A Roman buyer may encounter finished fabric after it has passed through merchants in Central Asia, Iran, Mesopotamia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Each intermediary has little incentive to explain the full chain of supply. Mystery protects margins. The less a buyer knows about origin and production, the easier it is to present the material as rare, distant, and almost miraculous. Silk's remarkable physical properties deepen that fascination. It can be woven into transparent gauze or heavy patterned brocade. Threads can be combined with gold or embroidered into scenes of animals, clouds, vines, hunters, and supernatural beings. A garment may signal wealth without the sheer weight of jewels. In some Roman circles, fine silk is criticized as extravagant and morally dangerous because it can cling to the body or reveal its outline. Such complaints do little to reduce demand. Condemnation often serves as proof that the luxury has become desirable. Yet the fabric moving west is not always woven in China. Raw silk and thread can be transported and reworked by artisans elsewhere. Patterns may reflect Iranian, Central Asian, Indian, or Mediterranean tastes. Textiles are cut, restitched, reused, and transformed as they cross cultural boundaries. A Chinese silk may become a sash in a steppe burial, a covering for a Buddhist relic, a robe in a Persian court, or a decorative strip on a garment in the Roman world. Its value changes with context, and its meaning changes with every new owner. Silk also moves northward and westward through diplomacy. Chinese dynasties distribute large quantities to frontier peoples, especially when negotiating with powerful nomadic confederations. Officially, such transfers may be described as gifts, rewards, or instruments of peace. Once received, however, the cloth can be worn, stored, divided among followers, or traded onward. Political silk becomes commercial silk. A shipment intended to prevent war may eventually appear in a market thousands of miles from the court that issued it. This creates one of the great ironies of imperial policy. The Chinese state uses silk to strengthen borders, yet in doing so it feeds the networks beyond those borders. Nomadic rulers increase their prestige by redistributing it. Central Asian merchants recognize that it can purchase horses, metals, gems, and loyalty. Oasis cities learn to profit from storing and reselling it. Faraway elites develop tastes that can only be satisfied by further exchange. The more silk leaves China, the more demand grows for the next shipment. By the early centuries of sustained transcontinental contact, silk is no longer simply a textile. It is portable authority, concentrated labour, and controlled beauty. Its production remains rooted in quiet rooms filled with mulberry leaves and silkworm trays, but its consequences extend across deserts and kingdoms. Rulers use it to secure alliances, priests wrap sacred objects in it, merchants calculate fortunes in bolts and bundles. Entire routes become more profitable because somewhere beyond the horizon, people are willing to pay extraordinary prices for a fabric whose true origin remains concealed behind distance. As silk moves beyond the Chinese frontier, it enters a world where no merchant kingdom or language controls the entire distance ahead. The fabric may begin its journey in a government storehouse, a noble household, or a frontier exchange, but from that point onward it passes through a succession of hands. A trader buys it near a garrison town and carries it to an oasis. Another purchases part of the load and takes it across a mountain pass. A third moves it into an Iranian market, where it is divided again, combined with other goods, and sent toward Mesopotamia or the Mediterranean. The profit does not belong to the person who travels farthest. It belongs to those who understand where one commercial world ends and another begins. This relay system is one of the most important features of Silk Road trade. The popular image of a single caravan crossing from China to Rome is powerful, but it is rarely realistic. Such a journey would require years, enormous capital, knowledge of many languages, and the ability to survive borders controlled by rival states. Most merchants specialize in a region. They know its roads, taxes, rulers, measures, currencies, and seasonal dangers. Their strength comes from local expertise and reliable partners farther along the chain. Near the eastern end, merchants operate through the Gansu corridor and the oasis settlements surrounding the Tarim Basin. Towns such as Dunhuang, Khotan, Kucha, and Kashgar become crucial because they stand where routes divide. Travelers can move north or south around the Taklamakan Desert, but both paths depend on water descending from distant mountains. A merchant arriving at one of these oases does not simply rest. He enters a marketplace of information. Prices are compared, animals replaced, guides hired, goods repacked, and political news gathered before the next dangerous stage. Some merchants come from the oasis states themselves. Others belong to communities spread across Central Asia. Among the most skilled are the Sogdians, whose homeland lies around the valleys of the Zarafshan and Kashkadaria rivers, especially near Samarkand and Bukhara. Their greatest commercial age lies ahead in this story, but even before they dominate the eastern routes, the pattern that will make them successful is already visible. They settle abroad without completely severing ties to home. A merchant may spend years in a distant city while remaining connected to relatives, partners, and religious communities across thousands of miles. Farther west, Bactria occupies another strategic hinge. Centered around the Upper Oxus region, in lands now divided among Afghanistan and its neighbors, Bactria links Central Asia, India, and the Iranian plateau. Its valleys are fertile enough to support cities, while its location gives access to mountain passes and river crossings. Traders moving through Bactria encounter Greek cultural influences left by earlier conquests, Iranian traditions rooted in the region, Indian goods arriving from the south, and steppe products brought by mobile peoples from the north. The market is not a meeting of two worlds, but of several worlds layered together. The Bactrian camel becomes an emblem of this trade because it is adapted to conditions that defeat many other animals. Its broad feet help it cross loose ground, its coat protects against cold, and its ability to carry substantial loads makes it invaluable. Yet even the finest camel cannot solve the problem of political borders. A caravan leaving Bactria may enter territories claimed by rulers who demand duties, gifts, or proof of peaceful intent. Local intermediaries become essential. They negotiate with officials, explain customs, and sometimes provide guarantees that a foreign merchant cannot offer for himself. To the west and southwest, the Parthian Empire controls much of the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia during the centuries when trade between Han China and the Roman world expands. Parthia is often portrayed simply as a barrier between Rome and the East, but its role is more complicated. Parthian territory contains old cities, caravan routes, agricultural regions, and powerful aristocratic families. The empire benefits from taxing commerce and from ensuring that valuable goods pass through its markets. Its merchants and officials have little reason to encourage direct trade between the distant empires on either side. Roman accounts sometimes accuse Parthian middlemen of concealing the source of silk or inflating prices. Such complaints may contain an element of truth, but they also reflect the frustration of buyers who do not control the supply chain. Every stage adds costs. Animals must be fed, guards paid, tolls negotiated, damaged goods replaced, and capital tied up for months or years. A bolt of silk that seems outrageously expensive in Antioch has survived deserts, mountains, war zones, theft, and repeated taxation. Its price is not merely the product of greed, it is the accumulated cost of uncertainty. Parthian merchants are not alone. Armenians, Syrians, Jews, Indians, Arabs, and many smaller communities participate in the traffic linking the Iranian world with Mediterranean markets. Some specialize in overland movement, others connect caravan routes to river systems and ports. Goods arriving in Mesopotamia can travel down the Tigris and Euphrates, across the Syrian desert, or toward the Persian Gulf. From there, maritime trade carries them toward Arabia, India, and East Africa. The distinction between Silk Road merchant and ocean merchant is often artificial. Commercial families invest wherever routes meet. These intermediaries move more than luxury goods. They carry letters, legal documents, religious texts, diplomatic messages, and news about distant rulers. A trader may know that an army has mobilized before officials in a neighboring province receive formal notice. Information becomes a commodity because it allows merchants to avoid danger or exploit scarcity. News of a failed harvest can raise grain prices. Rumors of war can increase demand for horses and metal. The death of a ruler may delay caravans until succession becomes clear. Translation is therefore as important as transport. A merchant who speaks several languages can negotiate more effectively, but no one masters every tongue of Eurasia. Professional interpreters, bilingual scribes, and mixed communities bridge the gaps. Contracts may be written in one language and witnessed by speakers of another. Coins carry inscriptions that some users cannot read, but learn to recognize by weight and design. Measures must be converted, and unfamiliar titles understood. A mistranslated quantity can be expensive, a misunderstood insult can be deadly. One surprising aspect of this world is that merchants often carry identities flexible enough to survive political change. A man may present himself as a loyal subject before one official, a member of a religious community before another, and a partner in a family firm at the marketplace. These identities are not necessarily false. They reflect the layered reality of people living between states. A trader belongs to a city, a lineage, a faith, a language, and a commercial network at the same time. The evidence remains incomplete because merchants leave fewer monuments than kings. Their successes appear in scattered contracts, foreign objects, inscriptions, and letters preserved by accident. Yet what survives suggests that the true architects of transcontinental exchange are rarely emperors. Rulers open and close borders, fight wars, and issue coins, but middlemen keep the system alive between political storms. They know which road remains passable after an invasion, which governor accepts silver instead of silk, and which family can be trusted with goods not yet paid for. By the time silk reaches the western edge of Asia, its path has become almost impossible to reconstruct. It has changed owners repeatedly, crossed several legal systems, and accumulated stories about lands most buyers will never see. The merchants who stand between those lands are sometimes dismissed as mere resellers, yet without them there is no Silk Road at all. Their wealth grows because distance creates ignorance, and ignorance creates opportunity. Between every producer and every distant consumer lies a gap, and the people who learn to occupy that gap begin to build commercial power no throne can easily command. From the river valleys around Samarkand and Bukhara, the Sogdians spread outward with a patience that resembles water finding cracks in stone. Their homeland is not a vast empire, and rarely possesses the military strength of the great powers surrounding it. It lies instead between them, exposed to invasion yet perfectly placed for trade. Mountains rise nearby, fertile valleys support orchards and grain, and routes converge from China, the Iranian world, India, and the northern steppe. Geography does not make the Sogdians invincible, it makes them necessary. Sogdiana is divided among city-states and local rulers rather than unified beneath one enduring throne. Samarkand becomes the most famous centre, but Bukhara, Panjikent, and other settlements also develop their own elites, temples, markets, and landed estates. Political fragmentation might seem like a weakness, yet it encourages merchants to rely less on one king and more on family connections, urban alliances, and communities abroad. A dynasty may fall at home while a Sogdian colony in a distant Chinese city continues trading. Commercial identity survives where political authority does not. By the early centuries of the first millennium, Sogdian merchants are increasingly visible across Central Asia, though their greatest influence emerges later, especially from the 4th through the 8th centuries. They do not merely send caravans outward and wait for their return. They establish permanent settlements along the routes. Sogdian families live in oasis towns around the Tarim Basin, in Chinese capitals, near frontier garrisons, and among Turkic communities of the steppe. These settlements become linked points in a commercial network stretching far beyond Sogdiana itself. Their language becomes one of the major languages of trade across Inner Asia. Written in a script derived from Aramaic, Sogdian appears in letters, religious texts, inscriptions, and commercial documents found far from Samarkand. A merchant travelling east can expect to encounter fellow speakers in market towns separated by weeks of difficult travel. Language reduces risk. It allows contracts to be negotiated with greater precision, news to circulate quickly, and disputes to be handled within communities that share expectations about trust and obligation. One of the most remarkable pieces of evidence comes from a group of documents known as the Ancient Letters. Discovered near Dunhuang at the western edge of China, written in the early 4th century, they were abandoned and preserved in the dry environment for more than 1,500 years. Their writers describe family troubles, commercial affairs, political disasters, and the loneliness of people stranded far from home. These are not royal proclamations. They are private voices from the machinery of trade. One letter records the distress of a Sogdian woman whose husband has apparently deserted her, leaving her and her daughter in hardship far from their homeland. Another discusses goods and financial arrangements. A merchant reports catastrophic events in Chinese cities, including warfare and destruction, not as abstract history, but as information affecting business and survival. The letters reveal how vulnerable these networks can be. Behind every successful merchant stands a household that may wait for years, uncertain whether a traveller is delayed, ruined, dead, or simply unwilling to return. The Sogdian system depends heavily on family. Sons are trained in languages, accounting, bargaining, and the customs of foreign markets. Relatives are placed in different cities so that goods can move through trusted hands. A merchant in Samarkand sends instructions to a cousin in Kashgar, who coordinates with a brother near Dunhuang, who may rely on a partner farther inside China. Capital circulates within this extended structure. Profits are shared, debts recorded. And marriage is used to reinforce alliances. Yet family alone is not enough. A successful network must absorb outsiders, cultivate officials, and form partnerships with people of different origins. Sogdians become skilled at adapting to local environments. In Chinese cities they may adopt Chinese titles, clothing, or administrative roles while preserving elements of their own language and religion. Among Turkic rulers they serve as advisors, diplomats, and scribes. In Buddhist regions they participate in Buddhist communities. Elsewhere they maintain traditions associated with Iranian religions, including forms of Zoroastrian worship. Some later become Christians or Manichaeans. Their flexibility is not evidence of a lack of identity. It is one of the tools that allows identity to survive abroad. Religion travels through the same networks as merchandise. Sogdian merchants help carry Buddhist texts and images, Christian teachings, Manichaean writings, and Iranian religious customs across Central Asia and into China. Monks often travel with caravans because the roads are too dangerous to cross alone. Merchants finance temples and religious communities, partly from devotion and partly because such institutions provide shelter, contacts, literacy, and trust. A monastery can be a spiritual centre, but it can also function as a safe node in a long-distance network. Their commercial range is astonishing. They trade silk, of course, but also musk from the Tibetan and Himalayan regions, amber, precious metals, spices, glassware, horses, slaves, textiles, medicines, and luxury animals. They understand that profit often lies not in the most famous commodity but in the less predictable ones. A shipment of silk may be valuable, yet a rare medicinal substance or a group of well-bred horses can produce even greater returns when demand suddenly rises. The Sogdians are especially effective in the horse trade. Chinese states require large numbers of strong cavalry animals, while the steppe and Central Asian regions possess breeds admired for endurance and speed. Horses cannot be packed into crates. They require handlers, fodder, water, and knowledge of terrain. Mortality can be high. A merchant who delivers healthy animals across great distances earns not only money but political favour. Access to horses is a matter of security for rulers facing powerful nomadic enemies, which gives traders leverage far beyond ordinary commerce. Art from Sogdian cities reflects the cosmopolitan world their merchants create. Wall paintings from places such as Panjikent depict banquets, processions, heroic tales, religious scenes, and richly dressed figures. Foreign objects and artistic motifs appear beside local traditions. Chinese silks, Iranian metalwork, Indian religious imagery, and steppe influences meet in houses built by elites whose wealth depends on distant exchange. These interiors are not merely decorative. They announce that the owner has access to worlds beyond the city walls. Some Sogdian merchants accumulate enough wealth to enter aristocratic society. They purchase land, sponsor public works, fund religious buildings, and marry into influential families. In China, leaders of Sogdian communities can receive official recognition and serve as intermediaries between the state and foreign residents. Titles associated with community leadership, grant both prestige and responsibility. The merchant becomes judge, representative, tax negotiator, and protector of his people. This influence attracts suspicion as well as respect. Foreign communities can appear useful during peace and dangerous during crisis. Their wealth is visible, their loyalties seem divided, and their ability to communicate across borders makes rulers uneasy. When rebellions or wars erupt, merchant minorities may be accused of collaboration or disloyalty. The same trans-regional connections that create power can become evidence against them. Scholars still debate how centralized the Sogdian network really is. There is no surviving proof of a single organization directing commerce from Samarkand. It is more likely a web of families, partnerships, colonies, and local leaders whose interests overlap without complete unity. Its strength comes precisely from the absence of one center. No army can destroy the whole system by capturing a capital. The network bends, reroutes, and continues. By the height of their influence, the Sogdians have achieved something kings often fail to do. They create a sphere of power that does not depend primarily on territory. Their realm is made of language, credit, kinship, and trust. It exists in warehouses, letters, guest houses, temples, and remembered obligations. Armies may control the ground beneath a road, but Sogdian merchants control much of what moves along it. Their empire has few borders and no single crown. Yet for centuries it reaches from the markets of Central Asia deep into China, carrying fortunes across distances that terrify almost everyone else. A caravan leaving Samarkand does not carry one fortune. It carries dozens of smaller fortunes stacked together beneath leather covers and woolen ropes. Silk may occupy the most honoured place in the imagination, but it is only one part of the cargo. Bundles of cloth rest beside sacks of spices, blocks of wax, carved ivory, metal vessels, medicines, pigments, perfumes, gemstones, glassware, paper, animal skins, and carefully sealed containers whose contents are known only to the owner. Some goods are valuable because they are rare, others become valuable because war, fashion, religion, or rumour suddenly makes them necessary. The great skill of a Silk Road merchant lies in understanding that value is never fixed. A product worth little in one city may become extraordinary a few hundred miles away. Cotton textiles from India, woven in patterns unfamiliar to buyers farther north, can be sold at several times their original price. Chinese silk grows more expensive as distance separates it from the regions where it is produced. Mediterranean glass attracts admiration in Central Asia and China because its transparency. Colour and shape differ from local traditions. Musk, collected from animals in mountainous regions, becomes precious as perfume and medicine. Lapis lazuli, coral, pearls, amber, jade, and garnets move through markets where their original source may be only vaguely understood. Every resale adds cost, but it also adds story. A merchant presenting a rare object does not need to know every detail of its origin. He needs to know how to make its distance meaningful. A polished stone from a remote mountain can be described as difficult to obtain. A glass bowl from the western seas becomes proof of access to lands beyond the horizon. A bolt of silk may be valued not only for its texture, but because it carries the prestige of an imperial court. Buyers are purchasing material, craftsmanship, and the imagined world from which the object has come. Profit depends on selecting goods suited to the next stage of the journey. A caravan cannot carry everything. Weight, fragility, spoilage, and demand must be calculated before departure. Grain is essential for survival, but usually too bulky to transport far for profit unless famine has driven prices upward. Fine textiles, gems, spices, medicines, and precious metals concentrate more value into less space. This is why luxury goods dominate the surviving image of Silk Road commerce. The routes are expensive, and the most profitable cargo is often what can bear the cost of distance. Yet caravans also move practical materials: metal tools, leather, salt, paper, dyes, medicinal plants, and ordinary cloth travel between neighbouring regions. Most goods never cross the entire continent. They circulate within shorter commercial zones, supporting the larger network from below. The Silk Road's wealth does not come only from spectacular treasures purchased by emperors. It also grows from repeated modest exchanges at frontier towns, village fairs, military posts, and oasis markets. A merchant may increase his capital by breaking one cargo into several. Part of his silk can be sold for silver, another portion can be exchanged for horses, the remaining bolts may be stored until prices rise. He can then purchase spices carried north from India, metalwork from Iran, or glass from Western workshops. Instead of returning with empty animals, he loads them with goods desired at home. The successful journey is not a straight sail followed by a return. It is a sequence of conversions in which one form of wealth becomes another. Horses are among the most important and difficult commodities. Chinese rulers value the powerful animals bred in Central Asia, particularly those associated with the Fergana Valley and surrounding regions. Later stories describe extraordinary horses that seem almost supernatural, though the evidence behind some of these accounts remains uncertain. What is clear is that military demand makes good horses politically valuable. A merchant capable of delivering them can negotiate with court officials rather than ordinary market buyers. Transporting horses is more dangerous than carrying silk. Animals fall ill, break legs, suffer from poor fodder, or weaken in unfamiliar climates. Guards and handlers must be paid. Water supplies must be sufficient not only for camels and people, but for an entire moving herd. A successful delivery therefore produces large returns, while failure can destroy an investment. The same is true of exotic animals sent as royal gifts, or sold to wealthy collectors. Falcons, hunting dogs, peacocks, lions, and other creatures sometimes travel through the network, turning caravans into moving menageries. Spices and aromatic substances offer another path to enormous profit. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, incense, and other products are used in food, medicine, ritual, and perfume. Some arrive through maritime routes before entering inland markets, while others come from mountain or forest regions. Their origins are often misunderstood, and merchants may deliberately protect that uncertainty. A substance believed to come from a distant and dangerous land can command a higher price than one associated with ordinary cultivation. Medicines are especially profitable because hope is difficult to price. Dried plants, minerals, animal products, resins, and powders move between healing traditions. A remedy used in India may be adopted in Iran, translated into another medical language, and sold in China under a modified name. Some substances genuinely possess useful properties. Others depend more heavily on reputation. Scholars still debate the identities of certain drugs mentioned in ancient documents, because names change as they cross languages and cultures. Glass offers a different kind of attraction. Roman and Near Eastern workshops produce vessels of remarkable clarity and colour, and examples reach Central Asia, India, Korea, and China. Some survive in elite tombs, where they appear among the most prized imported objects. A small cup can travel farther than the person who made it, and become a symbol of Western craftsmanship, in a court that knows almost nothing about the workshop of origin. Paper gradually transforms commerce itself. First developed in China and later spreading westward, it reduces the cost and weight of written communication. Contracts, inventories, letters, and accounts become easier to produce and transport. The material is not merely another trade item, it strengthens the network that carries it. A merchant can send more detailed instructions, preserve records, and manage partnerships across distance with greater precision. Coins move beside these goods, but barter and credit remain essential. A trader may accept silver by weight rather than trust the face value stamped upon it. Foreign coins can be melted, clipped, tested, or treated as bullion. Gold commands attention almost everywhere, yet its relative value changes from market to market. Skilled merchants profit from these differences as carefully as they profit from silk. The fortunes created by this trade are therefore rarely stored in one form. A wealthy family holds land near Samarkand, silk in a Chinese warehouse, silver owed by a partner in Bukhara, horses being driven across the steppe, and spices awaiting sale in an Iranian city. Their wealth is scattered, mobile and partly invisible. It exists in goods not yet delivered and promises not yet fulfilled. No single explanation fully accounts for why some merchants become vastly richer than others. Luck matters, political contacts matter, family networks, literacy, courage, and timing matter. The most successful recognize change before rivals do. They hear that a court wants war horses, that a monastery requires fine cloth, or that a failed harvest has raised prices. Then they move quickly enough to turn information into cargo. By the time a caravan reaches its destination, the goods beneath its covers have become something more than objects. They are the physical record of distance conquered and danger survived. Every jar, bale, and animal carries the cost of guards, bribes, losses, weather, and waiting. Kings may command taxes from entire provinces, but merchants who master these conversions can gather wealth from many kingdoms at once, one camel load at a time. The caravan does not truly arrive when the first walls appear on the horizon. Arrival begins earlier, when the road grows crowded with shepherds, farmers, tax collectors, guides, and smaller traders moving outward from the city. Dust rises from converging paths. Irrigation channels cut green lines through the dry earth. Watchtowers stand above orchards and fields, marking the edge of a settlement whose survival depends on water brought from mountains or drawn from deep beneath the ground. After weeks of exposure, the sight of trees can seem as valuable as the market itself. Cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Kashgar, and the oasis towns of the Tarim Basin do not become wealthy merely because caravans pass nearby. They prosper because they learn how to slow them down. A moving caravan is difficult to tax and impossible to sell services to. A caravan forced to rest becomes a market. Animals require fodder, shoes, harness repairs, and veterinary care. Travellers need food, shelter, guards, translators, guides, scribes, and information. Goods must be weighed, inspected, stored, divided, and sometimes repackaged for a different climate. Every pause creates an opportunity for someone to earn money. At the city gate, officials examine cargo and demand duties. The exact system varies by place and period. Some taxes are charged according to the value of the goods, others by weight, number of animals, or type of merchandise. Rulers may grant exemptions to favoured traders or religious communities, while extracting more from strangers with little political protection. Corruption is common, but not always separate from administration. A gift to an official may be understood as courtesy. Negotiation, or bribery depending on who records it. The merchant must decide whether paying the duty is cheaper than avoiding the city. Bypassing a major oasis can mean losing access to water, repairs, and protection. It can also mean entering territory controlled by bandits or rival authorities. Cities understand this leverage. Their walls promise safety, but safety has a price. The same ruler who suppresses robbery outside the gates may impose taxes inside them, severe enough to feel like robbery with paperwork. Within the walls, warehouses become the quiet engines of wealth. A merchant arriving with more silk than the local market can absorb does not have to sell at once. He can store it and wait for a festival, a diplomatic mission, or the arrival of foreign buyers. Warehousing allows time itself to become part of commerce. Goods purchased cheaply during abundance can be released when scarcity raises prices. Families controlling secure storage gain influence because they know what is available. Who owns it, and how long the owner can afford to wait? Merv, situated in a fertile oasis along routes connecting Iran, Central Asia, and Afghanistan, becomes one of the greatest urban centres of the medieval world. Its prosperity rests on more than passing luxury goods. Irrigation supports a large population, workshops produce local merchandise, and political powers value the city as a military and administrative base. Yet its position along caravan routes multiplies every other advantage. Merchants arriving from different directions bring not only goods but currencies, techniques, languages, and news. Samarkand gains similar strength from its position in the heart of Sogdiana. Its markets draw traders from the steppe, China, India, and the Iranian world. The city's wealth appears in decorated halls, religious buildings, gardens, and the clothing of its elite. Imported objects stand beside locally produced luxury goods, because prosperous cities do not simply resell what arrives. They imitate, adapt, and manufacture. Artisans study foreign designs and create versions suited to regional tastes. A motif from Persia may appear on a Central Asian metal vessel, while Chinese textile patterns influence local weaving. Bukhara grows through a comparable mixture of agriculture, craft production, scholarship, and exchange. Its location allows it to serve caravans travelling across the region. But the city's deeper strength lies in its ability to support permanent institutions. Markets require judges, money changers, inspectors, scribes, and religious authorities. As wealth accumulates, merchants fund buildings, endow charitable foundations, and purchase land. Passing wealth gradually becomes fixed in brick. Timber, gardens, canals, and property. Farther east, Kashgar stands where several difficult routes meet. To one side lie the passes toward the Fergana Valley and the Iranian world. To another stretch the routes around the Taklamakan. Southward, mountain corridors lead toward the Indian subcontinent. A caravan reaching Kashgar may have completed one of the most dangerous stages of its journey. Yet it still faces a decision about which road to take next. That decision supports an entire class of guides, brokers, and animal dealers familiar with the surrounding terrain. The oasis cities around the Tarim Basin survive because rivers descending from the mountains bring water into one of the driest regions on Earth. Irrigation turns narrow strips of land into orchards, vineyards, and fields. Such settlements can appear permanent, but their existence is fragile. Rivers shift course, canals fill with silt, political disorder interrupts maintenance. When water fails, streets empty and sand begins to reclaim walls. Archaeologists have uncovered abandoned settlements where documents, textiles, wooden objects, and even food survive because of extreme dryness. These ruins preserve the remains of cities whose prosperity once seemed secure. What survives in the record suggests that urban wealth is rarely distributed evenly. Rulers, great merchants, landowners, and religious institutions can accumulate enormous resources, while porters, servants, animal handlers, and labourers live close to poverty. The magnificent caravan city depends on people whose names disappear almost completely. They unload bales, clean courtyards, dig canals, repair walls, prepare food, and remove waste. A rich merchant's silk cannot reach the market without dozens of poorly recorded hands carrying it there. Caravanserais provide one of the most recognizable structures of this urban system. Some stand within cities, while others are built along roads between them. Their forms vary, but many contain a central courtyard surrounded by rooms, storage spaces, and stalls. High walls limit access and offer protection against theft. Travellers from different regions sleep close to their cargo and animals, while cooking smoke, unfamiliar languages, and the smell of leather fill the enclosed space. These places function as more than inns. They are temporary exchanges where partnerships begin and rumours spread. A trader hears that prices are higher 2 cities west, that snow has closed a mountain pass, or that a new governor is confiscating certain goods. A guide offers a safer route for a fee. A money changer warns that a batch of coins has been debased. A caravanserai contains no throne, yet decisions made inside its walls can redirect fortunes across continents. Local rulers recognize the value of this concentration. They build roads, maintain wells, patrol dangerous stretches, and compete to attract merchants. A reputation for fairness can enrich a city over generations. A reputation for arbitrary seizure can redirect caravans elsewhere. Even powerful rulers cannot ignore this choice. Merchants are mobile, and routes can shift. A city that taxes too aggressively may discover that its gates remain secure, its officials remain ready, and no one comes. The rise of these cities reveals the deeper structure of Silk Road wealth. Trade is not only movement between distant endpoints, it is accumulation at the places where movement pauses. Every warehouse, stable, customs office, workshop, and guest house takes a share of the value passing through. Kings may believe they control the roads because their soldiers guard them, but cities become rich by controlling the necessities that travellers cannot avoid. When the caravan finally leaves, it is rarely the same caravan that entered. Animals have been sold and replaced. Cargo has changed owners. New travellers have joined, while others remain behind. Silk has become silver, silver has become horses, and information has become a new plan. Behind the departing merchants, the city keeps part of everything taxes in its treasury, goods in its warehouses, wages in the hands of workers, and stories in the memory of its markets. The road continues. But the wealth it carries leaves roots wherever it is forced to stop. Once a caravan leaves the protection of city walls, its most valuable possession is not silk, silver, or spice. It is trust. The road can destroy cargo through weather or violence, but trade collapses even faster when promises lose their meaning. No merchant can personally watch every warehouse, accompany every shipment, test every coin, or stand beside every partner across thousands of miles. Wealth, therefore, depends on invisible structures strong enough to hold people together when distance makes immediate enforcement impossible. A merchant in Samarkand may send goods east while remaining at home. He entrusts them to a relative, an employee, or a caravan leader who's expected to sell at an agreed price, deduct expenses, purchase return cargo, and provide an honest account months later. By the time news comes back, the market may have changed and witnesses may have disappeared. The owner cannot simply send guards to recover a disputed payment from a city beyond several borders. He must rely on reputation. Written agreements, family pressure, religious obligation, and the knowledge that dishonesty will close future opportunities. This is why successful commercial families spread their members across the routes. A brother in Bukhara can receive goods sent by a cousin in Merv. A son living near Dunhuang can inspect a shipment before it moves deeper into China. An uncle can introduce a younger relative to trusted brokers. Family reduces uncertainty because kinship creates obligations that outlast a single transaction. Yet even families quarrel, abandon one another, or conceal losses. The ancient letters preserved near Dunhuang show that kinship can fail painfully, leaving spouses and dependents stranded far from home. Merchants therefore build wider circles of confidence. People from the same city, language group, or religious community often serve as witnesses and guarantors. A stranger may be accepted because someone reputable is willing to stand behind him. Introductions carry economic weight. To say that a merchant is known to a respected household can unlock credit, storage, and protection that silver alone cannot immediately purchase. Reputation travels quickly through caravanserais and market districts. News of fraud can move along the same routes as silk. A trader who cheats one partner may gain a short-term profit, but lose access to an entire chain of contacts. This threat is especially powerful in communities whose members repeatedly meet across generations. Merchants do not conduct isolated exchanges with anonymous buyers. They return to the same cities, depend on the same interpreters, and negotiate with families that remember earlier behavior. Written contracts strengthen these relationships, though their form varies widely. Agreements record loans, partnerships, sales, marriage arrangements, property transfers, and the division of profit and risk. Scribes are essential because many merchants cannot write every language used along the route. A document may be composed in Sogdian, Bactrian, Persian, Chinese, Arabic, or another regional language, depending on the place and period. Seals, witnesses, and recognizable formulas help give it authority. A written contract does not magically guarantee payment. It works only where courts, community leaders, officials, or powerful patrons are willing to enforce it. In some cities, disputes are judged under local state law. Elsewhere, foreign merchant communities handle internal disagreements through their own leaders. Religious institutions may mediate conflicts, while influential nobles can pressure debtors. The legal world of the Silk Road is layered, and merchants learn which authority matters in each place. Credit allows trade to expand beyond the amount of cash physically available. A buyer may receive goods now and promise payment after resale. A merchant can borrow capital for a caravan and repay the lender with a share of the profit. Several investors may divide the cost of one expedition so that no single family bears the entire risk. Such arrangements make larger ventures possible, but they also create complicated disputes when cargo disappears. If a caravan is robbed, the partners must determine whether the loss was unavoidable or whether someone acted carelessly. If goods are sold below expectation, they must decide whether the market truly collapsed or the agent concealed part of the payment. The evidence remains incomplete, yet surviving documents from different regions show merchants wrestling with problems familiar to later commerce interest: collateral, delayed delivery, damaged goods, inheritance, and dishonest accounting. Money itself requires trust. Coins circulate far beyond the kingdoms that issue them, but their stamped images do not always guarantee their value. Traders weigh them, test the metal, and compare them with known standards. A gold or silver coin may be accepted as bullion rather than legal currency. Money changers become indispensable because they recognize regional coinage and detect clipping, debasement, or forgery. Their tables stand at the point where political authority meets practical judgment. Weights and measures present similar dangers. A unit used in one city may differ from a unit with the same name elsewhere. Scales can be manipulated, stones altered, and measures filled dishonestly. Market inspectors attempt to control such fraud, though officials themselves may be bribed. Experienced merchants carry trusted weights or work through brokers who understand local standards. A small difference repeated across a large shipment can transfer a fortune. Translation adds another layer of vulnerability. A contract misunderstood through poor interpretation may bind a trader to terms he never intended. Interpreters do more than replace words. They explain etiquette, legal customs, titles, and gestures whose meanings change across cultures. A gift that signals respect in one court may appear inadequate in another. Silence may be interpreted as agreement, caution, or insult. The most valuable translators are often cultural brokers who understand how business is actually conducted. Religious communities offer another foundation for trust. Buddhist monasteries, Christian churches, Zoroastrian temples, Jewish communities, and later Islamic institutions provide travelers with contacts and sometimes shelter. Shared belief can create an initial presumption of honesty, though it never eliminates deception. Merchants donate to religious foundations partly out of devotion, and partly because these institutions preserve literacy, records, and long-distance relationships. Information remains the final and perhaps most profitable form of trust. A merchant must decide which rumours deserve belief. Reports of war, plague, toll increases, or road closures can save a caravan or lure it into a costly detour. Informants are judged by past accuracy. A guide who repeatedly provides reliable news becomes more valuable than a heavily armed guard because he can prevent danger before it appears. No king designs this entire machinery. It grows from repeated necessity. Families create customs, communities recognize leaders, scribes develop formulas, judges establish precedents, and merchants remember who kept faith during difficult years. The system is imperfect and often unjust, yet it allows agreements to stretch across spaces where direct control is impossible. The wealth of the greatest traders rests upon this unseen architecture. Their warehouses may be full, but much of what they own exists only as obligations, goods promised, debts recorded, profits expected, and partnerships maintained. A fortune can survive the loss of one caravan if trust remains intact. It can disappear even while the cargo is safe if confidence collapses. Along the Silk Road, gold opens gates, but credibility keeps them open. The promises holding a trading network together do not belong only to the men who ride with caravans. Behind warehouses, contracts, and letters stand women whose work is often hidden by the surviving record. Wives manage households while husbands travel for months or years. Widows inherit property and decide whether a family business continues. Daughters link merchant houses through marriage. Mothers preserve religious customs, supervise dependents, and protect the reputation on which commercial credit depends. Their names appear less often than those of male traders, but without them many merchant dynasties would have dissolved within a generation. Long-distance commerce creates a peculiar family life. A merchant may leave Samarkand for China while his wife remains responsible for land, rents, workshops, stored goods, and relatives. News travels slowly. A decision cannot always wait for instructions that may arrive a year later, if they arrive at all. Women in wealthy households therefore exercise practical authority, even where law and custom formally place property under male control. They hire labourers, negotiate with tenants, purchase supplies and settle disputes. Much of this leaves no inscription or monument, yet scattered documents show women participating directly in economic life across many Silk Road societies. The ancient letters from near Dunhuang expose the darker side of this system. One Sogdian woman, stranded far from home after being abandoned by her husband, writes with anger and desperation about her condition. Her words survive because the letter never reaches its destination. She has no secure income, little protection, and a daughter dependent on her. The document reveals how the same network that enriches merchants can trap their families. Distance gives a travelling husband commercial freedom, but it can leave a wife almost powerless if kinship obligations fail. Not every woman is so vulnerable. In many urban societies, widows can inherit or manage property, especially when no adult son is prepared to assume control. A merchant's death on the road may leave caravans, debts, warehouses, and land scattered across several regions. The widow who understands the accounts may be the only person able to prevent creditors, officials, or distant relatives from exploiting the confusion. She can appoint agents, demand repayment, or continue the business under the household name. Marriage is therefore more than a private arrangement. It can be a commercial strategy. A family with contacts in one city joins itself to a family with warehouses in another. A daughter raised in Samarkand may marry into a merchant household in Kashgar, creating a bridge between two networks. Her movement brings gifts, language skills, religious practices, and knowledge of family obligations. Such alliances reduce the risk of dealing with strangers because trade now passes through relatives by marriage. These unions can cross cultural boundaries. Foreign merchant communities in China, Central Asia, India, or the Iranian world do not remain completely isolated. Men who settle abroad marry local women, and their children grow up speaking more than one language and understanding more than one legal or religious tradition. This makes the next generation valuable as brokers. A child may know the customs of a foreign merchant household and the expectations of local authorities. What begins as marriage becomes commercial translation embodied in a family. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how much freedom women possess in different regions and periods. No single Silk Road society exists. Chinese law, Sogdian custom, Islamic legal traditions, steppe practices, and local habits shape women's rights differently. Status matters as much as gender. An elite widow with property and powerful relatives may command more influence than a poor man, while an enslaved or dependent woman may have almost none. Women also participate in production. Silk itself depends heavily on female labour in China, where women raise silkworms, reel thread, weave cloth, and manage household workshops. In Central Asia and the Iranian world, women contribute to textile making, embroidery, food preparation, animal care, and craft supporting caravan economies. Their work creates goods that merchants later present as products of cities or empires. the labour of countless unnamed women becomes luxury in a distant market. At the upper levels of society, merchant wives display wealth in ways that strengthen family prestige. Clothing, jewellery, imported vessels, decorated interiors, and religious donations announce access to faraway goods. Banquets allow a household to build alliances and demonstrate generosity. A woman presiding over such a space is not merely consuming wealth. She's helping convert money into status, hospitality, and obligation. Guests remember who received them well and who could be approached during a crisis. Religious patronage offers another path to influence. Women donate textiles, lamps, food, land, or money to monasteries, temples, churches, and charitable foundations. These gifts serve spiritual purposes, but they also attach the household name to respected institutions. A donation can support travellers, establish prayers for deceased relatives, and create ties with literate communities. The donor gains moral prestige while the family gains a public presence. Some women travel as well. Royal brides, pilgrims, enslaved captives, servants, entertainers, and merchant relatives move along the same routes as caravans. Their journeys are less well documented, but archaeology and written references show that the road is never exclusively male. A woman accompanying a household to a distant colony carries language, recipes, clothing styles, religious practices, and memories of home. Cultural exchange often enters quietly through domestic life rather than official diplomacy. The risks remain severe. War can transform merchant families into refugees. A regime change may invalidate property claims or turn a foreign community into a target. Widows and wives can be deprived of inheritance, pressured into unwanted marriages, or left responsible for debts they did not create. The fortunes celebrated in merchant houses are built beside constant insecurity. Wealth offers protection only while the network recognizes the family's rights. What survives in the record suggests that durable dynasties understand this. They educate daughters as well as sons in household affairs. They use marriage carefully, maintain ties with maternal relatives, and allow capable widows to preserve capital rather than divide it recklessly. Their success depends on continuity, and continuity is often managed far from the caravan yard. The Silk Road merchant who appears richer than a king is rarely a solitary genius. His wealth rests upon a household that stores goods, raises heirs, protects contracts, and keeps promises alive during his absence. Women stand at the centre of that structure, even when the documents push them toward the margins. They inherit the consequences of failed journeys and help turn successful ones into lasting power. The road may make the fortune, but the family decides whether it survives. The wealth preserved by merchant households does not remain confined to storerooms and account books. Once a commercial family controls enough silver, horses, grain, textiles, and information, rulers begin to notice. A king may command armies and claim divine favour, yet he still needs supplies delivered, taxes converted into usable goods, diplomatic gifts obtained, and distant courts understood. Merchants possess what palaces often lack: flexible capital, foreign contacts, knowledge of roads, and the ability to move quietly across political boundaries. Their power grows not because they replace kings, but because kings repeatedly discover that ruling without them is difficult. At first, the relationship seems simple. The merchant pays duties, and the ruler provides protection. In practice, neither side is satisfied with such a narrow arrangement. Governors borrow money to pay soldiers before tax revenues arrive. Courts commission rare textiles, gemstones, perfumes, and animals for ceremonies. Armies require horses, leather, metal, grain, and replacement equipment. Envoys need guides and interpreters. A merchant able to provide these things becomes more than a taxpayer. He becomes a supplier whose failure can delay a campaign or embarrass a court. This gives wealthy traders access to political spaces closed to ordinary people. They enter administrative compounds, negotiate with officials, and sometimes speak directly with rulers. The gifts they carry are carefully chosen. Fine silk may flatter a noble accustomed to luxury, while a powerful horse demonstrates knowledge of military needs. An unusual glass vessel or rare aromatic substance can make the giver memorable. The gift is presented as generosity, but everyone understands that it creates an obligation. Such relationships are rarely equal. A king can confiscate cargo, imprison a merchant, or cancel a debt through force. Yet arbitrary seizure carries consequences. Merchants redirect caravans, hide assets, raise prices, or warn partners to avoid a ruler's territory. A court that destroys one commercial family may gain immediate treasure while losing years of customs revenue and access to foreign goods. Wise rulers therefore cultivate rich traders, granting them safe conduct documents, tax privileges, monopolies, or authority over their own communities. In return, merchants act as intermediaries between the government and foreign residents. A Sogdian community leader in a Chinese city may collect taxes, settle internal disputes, organize religious life, and represent his people before local officials. His authority rests partly on state recognition and partly on the trust of the merchants beneath him. He stands with one foot inside the bureaucracy and another inside a transcontinental network. Few royal officials possess such reach. The same commercial experience makes merchants useful as diplomats. An envoy sent into unfamiliar territory must understand languages, etiquette, prices, routes, and local rivalries. Merchants already possess much of this knowledge. They know which gifts will be admired, which titles must be used, and which official actually controls access to the ruler. They can identify whether a polite promise is meaningful or merely ceremonial. Some accompany formal embassies. Others carry messages under the cover of ordinary business. Along the steppe frontier, Sogdian advisors become particularly influential among Turkic rulers. They provide literacy, administrative skills, and connections to settled economies. A nomadic ruler who controls vast grazing lands and armies of horsemen may still rely on merchants to sell captured goods, acquire luxury objects, manage tribute, and communicate with cities. Sogdian scribes help transform military power into diplomatic and commercial power. Their role is not always visible in royal chronicles, but inscriptions and scattered records reveal their presence close to courts. Information makes them even more valuable. Caravans cross borders that armies cannot cross without causing alarm. Merchants observe fortifications, troop movements, harvest conditions, political tensions, and changes in leadership. They hear rumours in market squares and caravanserais long before official reports reach a capital. A ruler may question them about roads or neighbouring states, and a merchant may provide truthful intelligence, selective truth, or whatever best protects his interests. This creates suspicion. The same trader who informs one government can inform another. Foreign contacts look useful in peace and dangerous in war. Officials may accuse merchants of spying, smuggling, or carrying forbidden messages. Sometimes the accusations are justified. Commercial correspondents can easily conceal political information, and caravan networks provide ideal channels for covert communication. Yet rulers often exaggerate these dangers when they need a reason to seize wealth. Merchants also finance political ambitions. A claimant to a throne requires supporters, transport, weapons, and gifts. A governor planning rebellion needs money before he can control tax revenues. Wealthy families may provide loans, expecting repayment through privileges if their chosen side succeeds. The reward can be immense reduced duties, exclusive trading rights, government positions, or access to royal estates. The risk is equally severe. When a sponsored ruler loses, his creditors may lose their property or their lives. No single explanation fully accounts for why merchants accept such danger. Profit matters, but so does protection. Neutrality is not always possible. A commercial family living under one regime may be forced to contribute to its wars. Refusal can appear disloyal, while support can provoke the regime's enemies. In frontier regions where power changes frequently, merchants must survive the arrival of new rulers who examine old alliances. Some families respond by spreading their loyalty as widely as their assets. One branch maintains ties with the local governor, another with a distant court, and a third with religious institutions respected by both sides. They avoid placing every hope in one dynasty. Their political strategy resembles their commercial strategy divide risk. Preserve alternatives and never allow a single disaster to destroy the entire network. Their wealth can sometimes outshine that of lesser kings. A small ruler may control land and peasants but possess little portable silver. A great merchant may command warehouses in several cities, hundreds of animals, debts owed by nobles, and partners capable of producing cash far away. The comparison remains difficult because royal and commercial wealth take different forms, yet the merchant's liquidity gives him unusual freedom. He can respond rapidly to opportunity, while a ruler may need months to collect taxes or summon labour. Still, merchant power has limits. It rarely commands open obedience. Traders depend on negotiation rather than decree, and their influence disappears when violence overwhelms law. A royal army can burn a warehouse in an afternoon. A mob can destroy a foreign quarter. A new dynasty can refuse to honour old privileges. Commercial power is broad but fragile, built upon agreements that survive only while enough people benefit from keeping them. What survives in the record suggests that the most successful merchants understand this fragility. They do not challenge kings openly. They present themselves as servants, suppliers, advisors, and loyal intermediaries. Their influence works through access rather than spectacle. They arrange a shipment, translate a letter, advance a loan, or introduce an envoy. Each act appears limited, but together they place merchant families inside the machinery of rule. The caravan road therefore leads farther than the marketplace. It reaches council halls, military camps, marriage negotiations, and diplomatic ceremonies. Silk and silver become political instruments, while information becomes a form of leverage. Kings still wear the crowns, issue the laws, and command the soldiers, yet beside them stand merchants who know where the horses can be found, which city will extend credit, and which distant ruler is ready to bargain. Their names may be absent from official histories, but their calculations quietly shape the decisions of empires. Wealth becomes most dangerous when it can be seen. A merchant may survive years of risk by keeping part of his fortune hidden in distant warehouses, unpaid debts, and family partnerships. But public life demands display. In the cities of Central Asia, Iran, China, and the Western lands, prosperity must sometimes be made visible to become useful. Fine clothing proves success. A lavish banquet creates obligation. A decorated house announces that its owner belongs among the powerful. Yet every display that attracts allies can also attract rivals, officials, thieves, and rulers with empty treasuries. The richest merchant families understand that luxury is not simply indulgence, it is a language of rank. Silk robes, gold belts, imported glass, carved furniture, silver vessels, perfumes, and rare animals communicate access to distant markets. A guest entering such a household does not merely see beautiful objects. He sees evidence of routes controlled, partnerships maintained, and risks successfully survived. The room itself becomes a commercial argument. Wall paintings from Sogdian sites such as Panjikent preserve something of this world. Banqueting figures sit in richly decorated interiors, wearing patterned garments and surrounded by vessels, attendants, musicians, and scenes of heroic legend. The paintings are not straightforward photographs of daily life, yet they reflect the tastes and ambitions of an elite shaped by trade. Foreign motifs appear beside local traditions, suggesting households that define themselves through connection rather than isolation. Clothing carries especially precise meaning. Silk can signal wealth, office, cultural affiliation, or proximity to a court. Patterns and colours may be restricted by law or custom, though enforcement varies. A merchant who dresses too modestly risks appearing insignificant, while one who dresses too grandly may seem to challenge social boundaries. The art lies in displaying enough splendour to command respect, without suggesting that commercial wealth has forgotten its place. Jewelry serves a similar purpose. Rings, earrings, necklaces, belt fittings, and decorated weapons concentrate value into portable form. They can be worn during ceremonies, pledged as security, gifted to allies, or carried away in crisis. Gemstones and precious metals also reveal the reach of the household's connections. A piece containing materials from several regions becomes a miniature map of trade. Banquets turn private wealth into public influence. The host provides meat, wine, fruit, bread, sweets, music, and imported delicacies. Guests leave with a sense of obligation that may later be converted into political support. Favourable contracts, marriage negotiations, or protection. Hospitality is expensive, but refusal to spend can be more costly. A family known for generosity attracts allies. One known for miserliness may find itself isolated when danger arrives. Religious giving offers a safer form of display. Merchants donate silk, lamps, land, money, and sacred objects to temples, monasteries, churches, and other institutions. Such gifts advertise piety while placing the donor's name inside respected spaces. A richly endowed shrine can preserve a family's prestige for generations. The gift may also support travellers, scribes, translators, and communities useful to trade. Devotion and strategy are not easily separated. Public works provide another route from wealth to legitimacy. A merchant can finance wells, bridges, caravanserais, irrigation channels, or city repairs. These projects serve practical needs while presenting the donor as a guardian of the community. A ruler may welcome such spending because it strengthens the city without draining the royal treasury. The merchant gains gratitude, visibility, and moral authority. Yet success creates resentment. Traditional aristocrats may view merchants as socially inferior people who have become too rich. Officials may suspect that their fortunes depend on smuggling, tax evasion, or foreign loyalties. Poorer citizens see imported luxuries displayed during times of scarcity. Rivals spread rumours that a merchant cheats partners, insults religion, or conspires with enemies. No single explanation fully accounts for outbreaks of hostility. But conspicuous wealth often gives anger a target. Foreign merchant communities are particularly vulnerable. Their clothing, languages, food, and religious practices make them easy to identify. During peace, difference may seem exotic and profitable. During war or economic crisis, the same difference becomes suspicious. A failed harvest, military defeat, or currency shortage can produce accusations that outsiders are hoarding grain, exporting silver, or manipulating prices. Sometimes rulers encourage this resentment. Confiscating a wealthy merchant's estate can solve an immediate financial problem. The victim may be accused of treason, corruption, or illegal trade, charges that are difficult to test when the state controls the court. Even if the accusation is partly true, the timing often reveals political need. A king facing unpaid soldiers may suddenly discover that a rich trader has violated a forgotten regulation. Merchants attempt to protect themselves by converting luxury into loyalty. They lend to officials, marry into respected families, sponsor religious institutions, and distribute gifts widely. They place some wealth in land, which appears more stable and socially acceptable than movable goods. Others seek titles or administrative posts, transforming commercial success into recognized status. This strategy can work for generations, but it carries a hidden cost. The more a merchant family enters aristocratic life, the more it may abandon the flexibility that created its fortune. Land cannot be moved when armies arrive. Court titles tie the family to a regime that may fall. Elaborate houses and estates require maintenance, servants, and continued political favour. Wealth once scattered across routes becomes concentrated where enemies can seize it. The evidence remains incomplete, but surviving tombs, art, textiles, and documents suggest that some merchants achieved levels of comfort unimaginable to most people around them. Their tables held foreign foods, their walls carried painted epics, and their children wore fabrics transported across continents. They lived close to kings not only in wealth, but in vulnerability. Both depended on public prestige, and both could be destroyed when prestige turned into envy. The most careful families therefore practiced a double life. They displayed enough to secure honour, while concealing enough to survive disaster. A magnificent reception hall might stand above storerooms, whose contents were deliberately understated. A merchant could present a jewelled cup at a banquet while keeping silver with partners abroad. Visible wealth built reputation, invisible wealth preserved independence. Along the Silk Road, luxury was never merely decoration, it was evidence, persuasion, protection, and provocation. It transformed profit into status, and status into influence, but it also marked the successful for attention. The merchant who wished to live like a king had to remember how often kings were overthrown. Every bright robe, crowded feast, and silver vessel declared that fortune had arrived. It also reminded the watching world exactly where that fortune could be found. The road that creates a fortune can erase it in a single afternoon. Beyond the walls of a prosperous city, wealth becomes exposed again, loaded onto animals, divided among drivers, and stretched across miles of vulnerable ground. A merchant may own warehouses, land, and political allies. Yet once his caravan enters a narrow pass or empty desert, none of those protections can stop an ambush. The same goods that attract buyers also attract men who prefer not to pay for them. Banditry is not a random inconvenience, but a permanent calculation. Caravan leaders must decide how many guards to hire, how visibly armed they should appear, and whether strength will discourage attack or advertise valuable cargo. Too few guards invite robbery. Too many consume profit and may frighten local officials who suspect a private army. Some merchants join larger caravans for protection, accepting slower movement and less control in exchange for safety in numbers. Bandits understand the road as well as merchants do. They watch wells, bridges, mountain defiles, and places where animals must slow. They learn which caravans carry silk and which carry grain. An attack rarely resembles a heroic battle. It is more often sudden confusion arrows from high ground, frightened animals breaking formation, handlers running, and guards unsure whether more attackers are hidden nearby. A few minutes can scatter investments assembled over years. Not every robber lives outside the law. Local chiefs, soldiers, and officials can demand payments little different from extortion. A merchant may be stopped by men carrying the ruler's insignia and ordered to pay an emergency toll that exists nowhere in written regulation. Refusal risks confiscation. Compliance encourages another demand at the next post. The line between taxation and robbery becomes especially thin where governments are weak and military commanders support themselves directly from passing traffic. Caravans therefore negotiate protection from the same powerful groups that might otherwise attack them. Guides arrange payments to tribal leaders whose territories the road crosses. Local rulers offer escorts for a fee. A merchant may distribute gifts before entering a dangerous district, purchasing not friendship but temporary restraint. Such agreements work only while everyone believes future trade will remain more profitable than immediate plunder. The landscape can be less negotiable. In deserts, water determines life, direction, and pace. A caravan may plan its movement around wells known through generations of experience, yet wells fail. Sand fills them, earthquakes alter underground flows, or rival groups deliberately block access. Water may be present but too salty for exhausted animals. A route safe in spring becomes deadly in summer, when heat increases consumption and shrinks the margin for error. Caravan leaders carry water in skins and containers, but every additional measure adds weight that could otherwise be used for cargo. They must balance safety against profit before departure, when the true conditions ahead remain uncertain. A guide who misjudges distance can destroy the entire company. Animals weaken first. Loads are abandoned, and merchants face the brutal decision of which goods deserve the remaining strength. Silk that once represented years of labour may be left beneath stones because water is suddenly more valuable than everything it could purchase. Cold brings equal danger in the mountains and high plateaus. Snow hides paths and closes passes without warning. Ice causes animals to slip, while wind removes heat faster than travelers can restore it. A caravan delayed by storms consumes fodder and provisions intended for later stages. When supplies run low, the choice may be to descend through unknown terrain, or wait in place and hope the weather changes. Disease moves with trade as surely as textiles and spices. Crowded caravanserais bring together people and animals from distant regions. Contaminated water, spoiled food, respiratory infections, parasites, and wounds can spread quickly among travelers already weakened by exhaustion. Medical knowledge varies, and even skilled healers cannot control epidemics whose causes remain invisible. A merchant may survive bandits and blizzards only to die in a crowded room near the market he struggled to reach. Pack animals face their own diseases. Camels develop sores beneath badly fitted saddles. Horses suffer from lameness, infection, and inadequate fodder. One sick animal can delay an entire line, and a contagious illness can devastate the herd. Replacing animals in remote regions is expensive, especially when local sellers recognize a desperate buyer. Every dead camel means less cargo, and every abandoned load transfers profit from the merchant to whoever finds it later. War magnifies all these dangers. When empires clash, roads close, bridges are destroyed, and garrisons seize supplies, armies consume grain, horses, leather, metal, and transport animals on a scale no ordinary market can match. This can enrich merchants able to sell to the military, but it also exposes them to forced requisition. A commander may promise later payment that never arrives. Soldiers may simply take what they need. Political collapse is even worse because it removes the authority that once made promises meaningful. A tax exemption granted by one dynasty becomes worthless under the next. Safe conduct documents lose force when the official who issued them is dead. Local governors declare independence, each demanding new duties. Routes fragment into overlapping zones of control, and merchants pay repeatedly for the privilege of moving through territory no ruler fully governs. Cities that prosper from trade can decline with startling speed under these conditions. If irrigation is damaged during warfare, agriculture fails. If caravans avoid the region, customs revenue disappears. Craftsmen leave in search of customers, warehouses empty, and walls become difficult to repair. A thriving oasis may not be dramatically destroyed in one event. It can shrink year after year until abandoned quarters fill with sand. Currency instability adds a quieter form of ruin. Rulers short of silver may reduce the precious metal content of coins while preserving their official value. Prices rise, creditors resist repayment in weakened money, and merchants demand payment by weight. A trader who accepts large sums at the wrong moment can discover that his apparent profit has lost much of its purchasing power before he reaches home. Taxation often increases during the same periods, because governments facing war or declining revenue search for wealth that can still be reached. Merchants are tempting targets. Their cargo is visible, their need to cross checkpoints unavoidable, and their foreign identity may leave them politically isolated. Extraordinary levies become ordinary. Confiscation is presented as a loan to the state. A merchant who protests too loudly risks being accused of disloyalty. Even success can create dangerous expectations. A ruler who knows that a family survived one major loss may demand another contribution. Relatives may seek support. Partners may conceal their own failures and expect rescue. Wealthy merchants carry not only goods but obligations, and a single disastrous season can reveal how much of their fortune was borrowed or promised elsewhere. Scholars still debate the scale of losses along particular routes because failed caravans rarely leave detailed records. Survivors write about what reached the market, while those who disappear leave silence. Archaeologists find scattered coins, abandoned goods, ruined stations, and human remains. But the story behind them is often uncertain. What survives in the record suggests that commercial success depended less on avoiding all disaster than on surviving enough of it. The greatest merchant families spread risk across routes, cities, and types of cargo. They invest in several caravans rather than one, store wealth in distant places, and maintain relationships with rival powers. Yet no strategy offers complete protection. A broad war, epidemic, or political collapse can strike several branches at once. Trust can fail just when it is needed most. Every fortune on the Silk Road therefore carries the memory of what almost destroyed it. The splendid house in Samarkand stands because a caravan found water. The jeweled cup survives because bandits attacked someone else. The merchant richer than a minor king remains wealthy because a mountain pass stayed open. A governor honoured his word, and disease passed over his household. Prosperity appears solid only after danger has moved on. On the road itself, it is always one broken axle. One failed well, or one changing dynasty away from disappearance. For centuries, the merchants themselves seem to vanish more completely than the kings they served. Empires leave triumphal inscriptions, palaces, walls, and chronicles written to preserve royal names. Traders leave warehouses emptied by descendants, contracts discarded after payment, textiles cut into new garments, and letters carried until they are no longer useful. Their lives survive only when ordinary objects escape the normal process of destruction. In the dry basins of Central Asia. That accident happens often enough to reveal a world once thought almost invisible. Sand preserves what cities forget. In abandoned settlements around the Tarim Basin, extreme dryness protects wooden tablets, scraps of cloth, food remains, shoes, religious texts, and private documents. Houses collapse, roofs fall inward, and dunes drift across streets, sealing fragile material away from moisture. When archaeologists uncover these places, they do not find a single complete archive explaining the Silk Road. They find fragments, a name on a tax record, a list of goods, a damaged contract, a letter whose intended recipient never reads it. The evidence remains incomplete, but together these pieces restore the human scale of commerce. The ancient letters near Dunhuang are among the clearest examples. Their survival depends on failure. They are written, folded, and prepared for delivery, yet for reasons that remain uncertain. They are abandoned in a watchtower or postal station. Had they reached their destinations, they might have been destroyed after use. Instead, they remain in the desert, preserving reports of war, trade, debt, family abandonment, and distant communities connected through Sogdian correspondence. The letters do not describe a romantic road of endless opportunity. They describe anxiety, delayed news, uncertain prices, and people trying to maintain obligations across enormous distances. Other documents reveal the practical routines behind the wealth. Contracts record loans, sales, taxes, and partnerships. Lists identify textiles, livestock, grain, spices, and tools. Receipts show that governments monitor movement and collect duties. Legal records reveal disputes over property and repayment. Even small details matter. A reference to fodder may show where caravans stop. A measurement of cloth may reveal regional standards. A foreign personal name inside a local document may identify a merchant colony, otherwise absent from historical narratives. Coins provide another trail. Roman, Iranian, Central Asian, Indian, Chinese, Byzantine, and later Islamic currencies appear far beyond the lands where they are minted. Their presence does not always prove direct contact. A Roman coin found in India may have passed through several intermediaries, while a Sasanian silver piece discovered in China may have circulated as bullion, jewellery, or ritual treasure rather than everyday money. Scholars must distinguish between a coin used in commerce and one preserved as an exotic object. Even so, their distribution shows how metal value crosses political boundaries. Coins also reveal changing power. New rulers stamp their images or names over older designs. Local authorities imitate prestigious currencies because merchants already trust their weight and appearance. Hoards buried during crisis preserve the savings of people who never return to recover them. A cluster of coins ending abruptly at one date can suggest invasion, political disorder, or sudden abandonment, though no single explanation fully accounts for every buried treasure. Some hoards are emergency deposits, others may be ritual offerings or merchant reserves hidden for ordinary security. Textiles speak where writing fails. Silk fragments appear in tombs from Central Asia to the Mediterranean, sometimes preserved by dry conditions and sometimes mineralized beside metal objects. Weaving techniques, dyes, thread structure, and patterns help researchers identify where a textile may have been produced or reworked. Yet the result is rarely simple. Chinese silk can be embroidered in Central Asia, cut into a Persian-style garment, and buried in a steppe tomb. The fabric carries several cultural histories at once. This reuse is important because luxury cloth is seldom discarded casually. A worn robe can be cut into ribbons, linings, covers, or decorative panels. Temple textiles may be repaired repeatedly. Burial garments may incorporate fragments older than the person wearing them. Archaeologists therefore reconstruct not only trade but long cycles of ownership. A scrap no larger than a hand may have crossed more borders than most ancient travellers. Glass vessels offer similar evidence. Chemical analysis can connect some examples to production regions in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Near East, Central Asia, or South Asia. When such objects appear in elite Chinese or Korean tombs, they reveal the prestige of distant craftsmanship, but their journeys remain uncertain. They may arrive through trade, diplomatic gift exchange, or the movement of court officials. What survives in the record suggests that commerce and diplomacy are often inseparable. Tombs preserve the identities of foreign communities with unusual clarity. In China, several elaborate burials associated with Sogdian elites contain stone funerary couches or sarcophagi carved with scenes of travel, banqueting, hunting, worship, and the afterlife. The imagery blends Iranian religious traditions, Central Asian clothing, and Chinese artistic forms. These tombs belong to people who have risen high within foreign lands while retaining connections to ancestral customs. Their inscriptions sometimes record official titles and places of origin, showing that merchant leaders can become recognized members of local administration. Yet the scenes on the stone reveal more than rank. Caravans cross bridges, riders approach cities, and richly dressed figures attend feasts. These images present mobility as part of identity. The deceased is not remembered only as a resident of one city, but as someone whose world stretches across routes. Wall paintings from Sogdian cities add another layer. At Panjikent and Afrasiab, painted halls depict emissaries, processions, myths, religious ceremonies, battles, and banquets. The famous paintings at Afrasiab include figures representing several regions, suggesting a court that understands prestige through international connection. Scholars still debate the exact historical events shown, but the visual message is clear: distant peoples matter to local power. Shipwrecks extend the story beyond land. Though usually associated with maritime trade rather than the classic image of camel caravans, wrecks in the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and surrounding waters preserve ceramics, glass, metals, spices, and other cargoes linking the same continental system. Goods unloaded at ports move inland by river and road, while caravan products travel towards ships. The Silk Road is not a sealed overland corridor. It is part of a wider network in which deserts and seas feed the same markets. Scientific methods now recover details invisible to earlier excavators. Isotope analysis can suggest where a person or animal grew up. Residue analysis identifies substances once stored in jars. Ancient DNA may reveal the movement of crops, livestock, pathogens, and human populations. Microscopic study of fibers identifies weaving traditions, while chemical testing traces pigments and glass ingredients. These techniques do not eliminate uncertainty, but they narrow the range of possible explanations. Lesser-known evidence survives in rubbish. Broken pottery, animal bones, worn sandals, discarded packing materials, and food seeds reveal how travellers actually lived. Camel bones show where transport animals were kept or slaughtered. Grape seeds and nutshells identify food moving between regions. Repairs on leather shoes reveal long use rather than elite display. The grand story of merchants richer than kings rests upon objects thrown away by people who likely considered them worthless. This archaeological record also corrects exaggeration. Not every caravan carries treasure, and not every merchant becomes rich. Many settlements depend on local agriculture more than international luxury trade. Some imported objects are rare enough to show that long-distance goods remain restricted to elites. The Silk Road is not a continuous stream of wealth flowing evenly across Eurasia. It is a fluctuating set of connections that strengthens, weakens, and redirects over time. Still, the buried evidence confirms the scale of human movement. A Sogdian letter in China, a Mediterranean glass bowl in an Eastern tomb, an Indian textile pattern in Central Asia, and Chinese silk in a Western burial belong to one broad story. None proves a direct journey from one end of the continent to the other. Together they reveal a relay of people who make such distance commercially meaningful. The merchants rarely build monuments declaring their achievements. Their monument is dispersal itself. It lies scattered beneath dunes, inside tombs, under ruined market streets, and among shipwreck cargoes, piece by piece. Archaeology reconstructs the commercial world that royal histories pushed to the margins. The kings remain visible because they ordered their names carved in stone. The merchants return because the sand preserved what they never expected anyone to read. The decline of Silk Road merchant power does not begin with one closed gate or one final caravan disappearing into the dust. It unfolds unevenly, over centuries, as routes shift, empires change, technologies spread, and the political worlds that once favoured particular merchant communities are remade. Some cities decline while others rise. Some families lose influence, while new traders inherit their methods. The road does not vanish. Its centre of gravity moves. For the Sogdians, the transformation becomes especially severe between the 7th and 8th centuries. Their commercial network has flourished because it links China, the Turkic steppe, Central Asia, and the Iranian world without depending on one stable empire. Yet that flexibility also exposes them when several regions change at once. Arab armies enter Central Asia. The Tang dynasty expands and then suffers internal crisis. Turkic confederations rise and fracture. And older city-state structures lose the political environment that supported them. The Arab conquests of Central Asia do not immediately destroy commerce. New rulers need taxes, urban markets, transport, and skilled administrators. Trade continues, and many local elites adapt. Some Sogdians convert to Islam, enter the new political order, and preserve wealth through accommodation. Others resist, migrate, or lose influence. The process is neither instant nor uniform. Scholars still debate how quickly Islamic institutions transform the social and commercial landscape of Sogdiana. But over time, Arabic and Persian gain prominence in administration and long-distance trade. This linguistic change matters. Sogdian has served as a commercial language across much of Inner Asia, linking merchant communities scattered through distant cities. As political authority shifts, the advantages of using Arabic, Persian, Chinese, or Turkic increase. Contracts, court records, and religious texts appear in new languages. A merchant family seeking influence trains its children accordingly. Sogdian does not disappear in a single generation. But the network that made it internationally powerful gradually loses cohesion. Farther east, the Anlushan rebellion beginning in 755 brings devastation to Tang China. The rebellion is led by a frontier general of mixed Central Asian background and tears through major regions of the empire. Cities are captured, populations displaced, and imperial finances strained. Foreign communities, including Sogdians, become vulnerable to suspicion because some are associated in the public mind with the rebellion's leaders and frontier armies. Violence against foreign merchants and residents occurs in several places, though the evidence remains incomplete and should not be reduced to one simple wave of persecution. The rebellion also disrupts the security that makes long-distance trade possible. Garrisons weaken, roads become dangerous, and the Tang state loses firm control over parts of its western territories. Tibetan expansion into the Gansu corridor further complicates movement between China and Central Asia. Routes that once connected Sogdian colonies with their homeland become harder to use. Commercial families survive locally, but the broad chain of trust linking them across continents begins to fracture. Political change in the steppe adds another layer. Sogdian merchants have prospered as advisors, scribes, and commercial partners of Turkic rulers. When one confederation falls and another rises, old privileges must be renegotiated. A network built around personal relationships with powerful families can weaken quickly when those families are defeated. New rulers may retain experienced merchants, yet they may also favour their own supporters or redirect trade toward different cities. At the same time, silk production is no longer confined as strongly to China. Knowledge of sericulture spreads into Central Asia, the Iranian world, Byzantium, and other regions. Later stories describe silkworm eggs hidden inside hollow staffs and carried westward by monks, but the details are difficult to verify and may simplify a longer process of technological transfer. What matters is that silk gradually becomes available from more than one source. This does not make Chinese silk worthless. Certain weaves, dyes, and patterns remain highly desirable. Yet the extraordinary profit created by secrecy and distance diminishes when competing centres can produce similar fabrics. Merchants who once controlled access to a rare commodity now face broader supply. The Silk Road continues to carry luxury textiles, but silk itself no longer guarantees the same commercial advantage. Maritime trade also expands. Sea routes across the Indian Ocean can move larger cargoes than camel caravans, especially bulky goods that are too expensive to carry overland. Ships connect Chinese ports with Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and East Africa. Ocean travel has its own dangers: storm, piracy, shipwreck, and changing winds, but it can bypass many inland tolls and mountain barriers. The growth of maritime commerce does not simply replace land routes. Ports and caravans remain connected, and many merchant families invest in both. Yet coastal cities gain importance, drawing goods and capital away from some inland centres. A commodity that once passes through several Central Asian markets may travel by sea to the Persian Gulf and enter Western networks from there. Oasis cities do not necessarily collapse, but their monopoly over certain exchanges weakens. The rise of Islamic commercial networks further reshapes trade from the 8th century onward. Merchants operating under shared legal, linguistic, and religious frameworks gain advantages across territories stretching from Central Asia to North Africa and the Mediterranean. Islamic law develops detailed practices concerning partnership, debt, inheritance, and contracts. Mosques, courts, and scholarly communities create new institutions of trust. Sogdian methods do not vanish. Many are absorbed into a wider commercial world. This transformation illustrates a larger pattern. Merchant networks rarely disappear without leaving descendants. Their roots, customs, and partnerships are inherited by others: Persian-speaking traders, Arab merchants, Jewish commercial communities, Indian merchants, Turkic intermediaries, and later Italian city-states all participate in evolving systems of Eurasian exchange. Each generation imagines itself entering new territory, yet much of the infrastructure is older. Environmental change may contribute to local decline as well. Oasis settlements depend on fragile irrigation systems and stable water sources. Rivers shift, canals silt up, and prolonged drought can reduce agricultural support. Warfare worsens these problems by interrupting maintenance and displacing labour. When a city loses both water security and caravan traffic, recovery becomes difficult. No single explanation fully accounts for the abandonment of every settlement, and environmental evidence differs sharply from region to region. The Mongol conquests of the 13th century later destroy many cities, but also create a new phase of transcontinental connection. This apparent contradiction captures the nature of Silk Road history. Armies burn towns, kill populations, and overturn dynasties, yet the resulting empire eventually protects routes across an enormous territory. New merchants rise under Mongol rule, using systems partly built upon older networks. Decline in one century becomes renewal in another. By the late medieval period, changing political boundaries, maritime expansion, and the growth of new commercial powers gradually alter the importance of classic Central Asian routes. European sea voyages around Africa later provide direct access to Indian Ocean markets. While gunpowder empires and expanding states reshape taxation and security, even then, overland trade persists. Camels continue moving textiles, horses, metals, tea, and information across Asia long after the phrase Silk Road would suggest an ancient world already gone. The merchants who once seemed richer than kings do not all end in ruin. Many become landowners, officials, scholars, or members of new religious communities. Their descendants stop calling themselves Sogdian, Parthian, or Bactrian, and adopt identities suited to the societies around them. Commercial success dissolves into aristocracy, bureaucracy, and urban life. The network disappears partly because it succeeds so thoroughly in embedding itself elsewhere. What fades, then, is not trade but visibility. The merchant empire without borders leaves no formal date of collapse because it never possessed one throne to overthrow. Its language retreats, its colonies blend into local populations, and its roots lose their former centrality. The great commercial world changes its names, currencies, and gods while preserving the same basic need to bridge distance. The Silk Road's decline is therefore less like a road closing than a river dividing into new channels. Some branches dry out, others flow toward ports, capitals, and markets that earlier merchants could scarcely imagine. The old fortunes scatter, but the knowledge behind them survives how to divide risk, convert goods, cultivate trust, and profit from the difference between what one society possesses and another desires. The merchants fade from the chronicles, but the world they created does not disappear with them. Their names become harder to trace, their languages retreat, and the cities that once sheltered their caravans change rulers many times. Yet the habits formed along those roads remain embedded in Eurasia. Religions, technologies, foods, artistic styles, financial practices, and entire communities continue moving through channels opened and maintained by generations of traders. The greatest legacy of the Silk Road merchants is not a single treasure or ruined palace. It is the idea that distant societies can become part of one another's daily lives without ever sharing the same king. Silk offers the most obvious example. Once restricted largely to Chinese production, sericulture spreads into Korea, Japan, Central Asia, the Iranian world, Byzantium, and eventually farther west. Each region develops its own weaving methods, patterns, and symbolic meanings. A fabric once surrounded by mystery becomes an international industry. Chinese techniques remain influential, but they are adapted by artisans who combine them with local designs, Iranian roundels, Central Asian animals. Mediterranean vines and East Asian clouds appear in new arrangements, revealing how trade transforms rather than merely transports. Paper follows a similar path with even greater consequences. Developed in China, it travels westward through Central Asia and the Islamic world, where paper-making centers expand production and improve distribution. Paper makes records, correspondence, literature, science, and administration more accessible. Merchants help carry the technology because they immediately understand its practical value. A lighter writing material means more contracts, more letters, and more information moving with less weight. Centuries later, paper enters Europe in increasing quantities, helping create conditions for wider literacy and the eventual spread of printing. Food also preserves the memory of exchange. Grapes, melons, walnuts, pomegranates, peaches, spices, and other crops move across regions through complicated processes that often begin long before the classic Silk Road and continue long afterward. Merchants, migrants, soldiers, and farmers all contribute. New plants change agriculture and taste. A fruit cultivated in one valley becomes ordinary in another, its foreign origin eventually forgotten. The same happens with recipes and habits. Noodles, breads, dumplings, fermented drinks, dairy products, and methods of preserving food appear in many forms across Eurasia. Claims that one culture simply invents a dish and hands it unchanged to another are often too neat. The evidence remains incomplete, and similar foods can arise independently. Yet long-distance contact clearly encourages imitation and adaptation. Travellers carry expectations about how grain should be cooked, how meat should be seasoned, and which drinks belong at a feast. Religions leave even deeper traces. Buddhism moves from South Asia through Central Asian kingdoms and into China, Korea, and Japan, supported by monks, translators, patrons, and merchants. Buddhist monasteries rise along commercial routes, offering travellers shelter and creating centres of literacy. Texts must be translated, and translation reshapes ideas as much as language. Images of the Buddha acquire artistic features influenced by Greek, Iranian, Indian, and Central Asian traditions before entering East Asia. Christian communities also travel eastward, while Manichaeism spreads across extraordinary distances before declining under political and religious pressure. Iranian religious traditions accompany Sogdian merchants into China. Islam later expands across Central Asia through conquest, scholarship, migration, and commercial contact. Merchants are not the sole agents of these transformations, but they provide the movement, patronage, and networks that allow religious communities to survive far from their places of origin. Commercial practices prove equally durable. Partnerships that divide investment and risk allow merchants to finance ventures too large for one household. Credit reduces the need to transport heavy metal currency. Written contracts preserve obligations across time and distance. Community courts, respected witnesses, and religious institutions help enforce agreements where state power is weak or unfamiliar. Later trading societies refine these methods, but the essential problem remains the same: how to trust someone who holds your fortune hundreds of miles away. Bills, letters of credit, and related financial instruments eventually allow merchants to move value without moving equivalent quantities of coin. No single Silk Road people can be credited with inventing every later method, and scholars still debate the precise lines of influence. What survives in the record suggests a long history of parallel experiments shaped by contact. Wherever roads are dangerous, merchants search for ways to make wealth less visible to robbers and less expensive to transport. The network also leaves a linguistic legacy. Commercial languages rise because traders need shared tools of communication. Sogdian once performs this role across much of Inner Asia. Persian later becomes influential across a broad zone of courts and markets. Arabic links merchants across the Islamic world, while Turkic languages expand with changing political powers. Words for goods, weights, taxes, foods, clothing, and financial practices pass from one language into another, often preserving the shadow of forgotten encounters. Cities carry these layers most clearly. Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, Merv, and many other centres are repeatedly destroyed, rebuilt, conquered, and transformed. Their monuments may belong to different centuries, yet their enduring importance grows from geography and accumulated human knowledge. Wells are dug where earlier travellers found water. Markets rise where routes already converge. A city can outlive the empire that enriches it because merchants remember its usefulness. Some cities do not survive, their canals fail, their populations depart, and sand moves through abandoned rooms. Yet even these ruins influence the present by revealing how fragile urban wealth can be. Prosperity depends not only on geography, but on maintained infrastructure, political restraint, and confidence. A route exists because people believe it will remain open. Once that belief disappears, walls and warehouses lose value with surprising speed. The Silk Road merchants also change the societies in which they settle. Foreign quarters become permanent neighbourhoods. Intermarriage creates families whose identities cannot be reduced to one homeland. Children speak several languages and inherit several traditions. Clothing styles mix, funerary customs blend, and local art absorbs distant motifs. The movement of culture does not require entire populations to migrate. A small community of merchants can leave a lasting mark if it remains connected, prosperous, and visible. Their influence reaches beyond luxury. Knowledge of astronomy, medicine, mathematics, geography, and engineering moves through the same broad network, though rarely in one direct line. A text is translated, corrected, misunderstood, and expanded. A medical substance enters a new system of healing. A mathematical method travels with administrators or scholars supported by commercial cities. The road does not carry pure packages of knowledge. It carries fragments that new societies reshape. Disease moves as well. Trade connects populations that previously share fewer pathogens, creating conditions for epidemics. The exact role of overland routes in particular outbreaks remains debated, especially when evidence is sparse. Yet increased mobility inevitably carries biological consequences. The same network that spreads crops, faiths, and inventions also spreads infection. Connection enriches and endangers at the same time. This contradiction remains at the heart of the merchants' legacy. They make the world larger by revealing distant lands and smaller by linking them through exchange. They create prosperity, but wealth attracts conquest and exploitation. They encourage tolerance because business requires cooperation across difference. Yet foreign communities remain targets during crisis. They serve kings while building networks that no king fully controls. Their greatest achievement may be their ability to live between identities. A merchant can belong to a Sogdian family, serve a Chinese official, worship through an Iranian tradition, speak Turkic with caravan guards, and trade in silver minted far to the west. Such a life does not fit neatly inside modern national boundaries. It reflects a world in which loyalty, language, faith, and commerce overlap rather than align perfectly. The phrase Silk Road is itself modern, applied long after the most famous merchants have disappeared. It creates a useful image, but also a misleading one. There is no single road, no uninterrupted age of peace, and no simple stream of goods flowing between two endpoints. There are routes that open and close, cities that rise and fall, and people who continually rebuild connections after war and collapse. The merchants who become richer than kings do so because they understand this instability better than most rulers. They know that power does not rest only in land or armies, it can rest in movement, information, reputation, and the ability to connect people who need one another without fully understanding one another. Their wealth is remarkable, but their deeper legacy lies in the systems that make such wealth possible. A king's authority usually ends at a frontier. The merchant's world begins there. Beyond the border waits another currency, another language, another law, and another opportunity to translate difference into value. The Silk Road merchants build no single empire, yet they leave behind something more adaptable than one, a connected Eurasia that continues to exchange goods and ideas long after their caravans have vanished from the horizon. The roads are quieter now. In places where camel bells once sounded through the evening, highways cross the desert, railway lines approach old oasis towns, and aircraft pass far above mountain routes that once demanded months of preparation. Some ancient streets remain crowded, others lie beneath sand, their walls reduced to low shapes beneath a sky unchanged by the disappearance of everyone who knew their names. A fragment of silk rests in a museum case, its colours weakened by centuries. A letter survives because no messenger delivered it. A silver coin lies far from the ruler whose face it carries. These small objects are what remain of fortunes once measured in caravans, orchards, warehouses, and promises. The men and women who owned them believed in plans extending across years. They waited for news from distant partners. They worried about water, war, prices, and children. They lived inside uncertainties that history later smooths into a line drawn across a map. But the line was never the road. The road was memory which well remained sweet, which official could be trusted, which family would honour a debt after the original merchant was gone. It was the patience to cross an empty landscape because somewhere beyond it, a stranger desired what the caravan carried. It was the quiet understanding that distance could be transformed from an obstacle into a form of wealth. The kings have also faded. Their victories survive in inscriptions, but the frontiers they defended have shifted or disappeared. The merchants leave fewer declarations. Their legacy lives more softly, in fabrics, words, foods, faiths, and customs that no longer seem foreign because trade made them familiar. Night settles again over the old routes. The desert loses its colour, the mountains become silhouettes, and the stars return above the places where caravans once moved. For a moment, it is possible to imagine the slow creak of saddles and the measured steps of camels carrying silk through darkness. Then the sound is gone, leaving only the road, the wind, and the memory of people who crossed a divided world and quietly taught it how to connect